Hello students, today we are going to learn a very important concept, and that is why a why a myelinated neuron myelin neuron has faster conduction. Okay, so that's the question here. Okay, now to understand it, let's draw a very simple uh, neuron. Let's draw this neuron, assuming this is a neuron. Okay, and of course we have some of the dendrons here. We'll draw some dendrons. Okay, though they are not important right now, we need to understand about the myelin. Okay, so this is the diagram of a neuron. Okay, now for the sake of the argument, for the sake of the concept, let's draw some sodium channels and potassium channels here. So on the neuron, I'm drawing some sodium channels. From the previous concepts, you already know that the alternate opening of sodium and potassium channels is the reason why the impulse travels from one point to the other point. So with the red, I have drawn the sodium channels. Okay, these are sodium channels, and let's also draw some of the potassium channels from the green dots. So these green dots, let's represent the potassium channels. So these are, right now I'm drawing them uniformly distributed all over the neuron. Now this is the case with the non-myelinated neuron. There is an equal distribution of the sodium and potassium channels all around the neuron. Hence, when the impulse strikes, you have learned this in your earlier classes, earlier videos, that as the new impulse strikes, there is a depolarization at one point. Let's call it A, and from A, the depolarization moves to the B, and from B it moves to the C, from C it moves to the D, from D it moves to the E, and E it moves to the F, and F it moves to the G, G to H, H to I to, let's say, J, J to IJK, K to L, M, and so on. So this is how impulse conducts. And you know that you have already learned that this conduction is because of the opening of sodium channels. The sodium channels open at A, then at B, then at C, then at D, then at E, then at F, and then at G, then at H. So there is influx of sodium, and that's how, because of the influx of sodium, the polarity changes and the impulse travels. That's what you have already learned. And of course, meanwhile, as soon as the sodium channels open at A and the impulse moves to the B, the potassium channels opens, and the potassium moves out from the A point, and similarly at the B point, similarly C point, D point, E point, F point. So as soon as impulse moves from one point to the another, the potassium channel opens, and by the opening of sodium and potassium channels, by the influx of the sodium and efflux of the potassium, the depolarization shifts from one point to the another point, to another point, to another point, to another, and so on. The impulse travels. Now, how is it different in a myelinated neuron? Let's understand that. So let's again draw a myelinated neuron. Okay, so let's say this is a myelinated neuron. Now, what happens in the myelinated neuron is that it is covered by myelin. So let's draw some myelin. So I'm drawing this myelin, and this myelin is not uniformly distributed. It's not uniformly distributed. Rather, it is non-uniformly distributed. So I'll draw it here. Here is the myelin. Then I'll leave some gap, and then again there is myelin. Then leave some gap. There is the myelin, and then leave some gap. There is the myelin. And I'll mark the points. Okay. I'll mark the points as A, and let's say B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Okay. Now the difference is that because of the myelin, because of the presence of the myelin sheath, wherever the myelin sheath is present, wherever the myelin is present, shown by the yellow, the channels, the sodium and potassium channels are very low in concentration at these points. So you'll find the sodium channels at the A point, at the E point, at the I point, at the M point, but it will lack or will be in very low concentration at these points. So I'm not drawing any of the sodium and potassium channels at the points where you find the myelin. So it's very simple concept. As soon as the impulse strikes the neuron again, so there is a depolarization at the A point where sodium influx takes place, as it happens in a non-myelinated neuron the same way. And because of this influx, okay, there's a depolarization at the A point, you know the concept. And now, rather than depolarizing the B point, the impulse travels directly to the E point, because B, C and D points lack the sodium and potassium channels. Okay, lack the sodium and potassium channels, B, C, D. So impulse, rather than going to B point, travels directly to the E point. And then from the E point, it directly travels to the I point. And then from the I point, it directly travels to the M point, thus depolarizing each point. But the time is saved, which was wasted in the non-myelinated neuron. You are depolarizing A, B, C, D every point. But here you are missing some of the points and directly depolarizing the points distant from the one point. So here the conduction loops, those are formed longer conduction loops. You have studied conduction loops in the previous lectures. So the conduction loops are long because myelin is insulating, and therefore some of the points are missed. So the depolarization, rather than happening at every point, it is only happening at certain points. It happens at A, then at E, and then at I, and then at M. Only at those points where myelin is absent, and those points, you have learned about this. Those points are known as nodes of Ranvier. So we can say that impulse is actually jumping. It is observed that it is jumping from one point. It is jumping from one point, that is A to E to I to M, and this is known as jumping conduction, also known as saltation. Saltation means jumping, or saltatory conduction. Okay, so that's the reason we can understand. It's a very simple concept that a non-myelinated neuron is a local train. It's a local train at which stops at every station, picks up the passengers at every station, drops the passenger at every station, which is wastage of time. Whereas a myelinated neuron doesn't stop at every station, doesn't pick up passengers at every station. Rather, it misses the stations. It has only big stations, and it runs from one station to the another. Stops have fewer stops, and hence the conduction is faster. And that's the reason that, in spite of the fact the myelin being insulating, it increases the speed of conduction. And that's all. Thank you very much.